Hello, Yvonne. How are you doing?
I'm good today, thank you. How are you, Sylvia?
I think I'm all right. I've had a bit of a busy day, and I was absolutely determined to have all my technical bits and pieces working by the time we start our little discussion. So I'm glad we're both here, and it looks as though it's going to be all right.
I think it's a beautiful day today. It really
It
helps.
is. It is. Yes, yes. I did say I was going to comment about that because it's a little unusual, but it's nice. Very nice. Well, welcome to Social Workers Matter, Yvonne. It's so lovely to meet you. As we were saying just before we started recording, we haven't actually met each other in real life, but
No.
I think we've got a little connection there. So I'm happy about that. Social Workers Matter is a podcast where we interview social workers, but we also interview people from allied professions who have sort of sensibilities around kind of human growth, development, and healing. So when I came across your profile on LinkedIn, I thought, oh, I must speak with her. I wonder if she'll speak to me. So Yvonne, I want us to start really with you saying a little bit about what you're currently doing in terms of your professional activities, but also to take us a bit back to sharing something about yourself and your background.
Yeah, that's fine.
Please, I'm inviting you to do that. Yeah, yeah.
So at the moment, I work as a counsellor online since March 2 years ago. So it's beginning to feel like a very long time. Yeah. I was out looking at some rooms to hire today with the thought of doing some face-to-face again. Got quite excited. You're going back?
Okay.
Thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So I work as a counsellor, and the best way to describe my practice, it's a private practice, is intersectional. Yeah. And I didn't realise that until someone pointed out to me all the client groups that I said I would work with. And I think that's a reflection of my working life. So before I was a counsellor, I was actually a lecturer and doing my PhD. But before that, I was working in the voluntary sector. Yes. And I worked with such a wide variety of clients, parents, did parenting groups. I worked with young offenders. I ran an advocacy project for looked after children. I work with refugees and asylum seekers. I've always been an advocate for the disabled and for the LGBTQ community. So I think my practice is a reflection of my work, actually. I wasn't intentionally being intersectional, but actually, it is. And that means I get to work with a really wide variety of people. But I would say that what brings them to me, the general connecting theme, is identity.
Right.
Issues around identity. And they don't feel that that's something that they feel comfortable with, or they're having problems around, or they're just confused about. So that would be the connecting theme.
Wow. I'm guessing you're talking about 30 odd years of work collectively with everything that you've just shared.
Yeah, I'm going to be 60 this year, and you start to think, wow, I've been doing this kind of thing for a long time. Yeah, a long time.
Wow. So let's go back then a bit, because there's so much that we could explore in terms of what you just shared. So let's go back. Where did it all start for you personally and professionally? What brought you to this sort of work?
The first role I had around caring, if you like, was back in the day in the 80s when I lived in London, and there were no jobs in the 80s. And Manpower Services, if you signed on, you had to go and do these placements with Manpower Services Commission. You could just be sent anywhere.
I can see the brand now, actually, Manpower Services, yeah.
And I got sent to a kind of agency that looked after young people with disabilities.
Okay.
So that was my first kind of experience of doing it as a role, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And then I went off and did a sociology degree, and it sort of started to understand, you know, the different layers of society,
Yes,
and
yes.
who's suffering from inequality, and that was brilliant, you know. And then after all of that,
where did you study?
I studied in a polytechnic, and I'm really proud to say that, because
Yeah, me too. But which one did you do? Which one?
City of London.
Okay, mine was London Met. Well, what is London Met now?
Were you in North London in
yes.
Town?
Yes.
Yes. Because the polys were brilliant at educating adults, and I wish they'd never gotten rid of them, because they were so good at what they did.
Yes, definitely.
So I was at the City of London Poly doing sociology, and I think third world studies, chucked in some psychology and some German history, and just loved it. I mean, I just absolutely loved it. I couldn't read enough. I couldn't read quick enough. I just couldn't, you know, get it all down quick enough. It was the best 3 years of my life, I think, that first degree.
That's so lovely to say, to be able to say that, actually.
It was really, really good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you what I guess I was trying to get at was, were you drawn to the work? But it sounds as though it happened, and as a consequence, you kind of really enjoyed it. This was I'm talking about your earliest work.
I think I was well, I was sent there by Manpower Service Commission initially, but I began to see that there was a role I could do. I left school with an O-level in English, and I think I had CSE geography. So there wasn't a huge amount I could do with that. So I suppose I sort of fell into the kind of caring role, and enjoyed it. Yeah, I just took to it.
Yeah. You've now piqued my curiosity again. When you think back on your educational experience, how do you make sense of that in your own mind? This is your early education experience, because I would imagine that you and I were educated during this kind of same era. And I often look back on my own education experience as not being terribly good. It was good in some bits, but overall, and I mean, you know, obviously one has to take some responsibility for what you get out of it. But what do you think about when you think about your earlier education experiences?
Oh, it was really difficult. It was very, very difficult. So I was in the care system. So at 5, I was in a foster family, and so I went to one primary school for 2 years, from 5 till 7. That was really, really difficult, because my foster sister and I were the same age, but she'd get invited home for tea and I wouldn't. She was white. So she'd be getting invited home for tea after school and I wouldn't. So that was really, really difficult. And then we moved to Rugeley, which was a mining town. So there were lots of people who were different there: Polish, Irish, you name it, Italians, all kinds of different people.
Let me pause you for a minute there. You said Rugeley. Come on, for us who are hopeless at geography, what part of the country?
Rugeley's in Staffordshire.
Staffordshire, okay. Yeah, I'm going there this summer, but okay.
Okay. So there were lots of different kinds of people there. So that was much easier for me. So I spent 7 years there, and it was better in the sense that there was a lot of people who were different. Yeah. So that was better, but still difficult. I think to sum it up, I think I was about, I'm going to say 9 or 10. And I know me and my foster sister, were in different classes. And in my class, I don't know how I picked up that the teacher was ignoring me, but what I used to do was just go to school, get a book, open my desk lid and read. That's what I was doing, just reading books. And then Parents' Day happened, and my foster mother said, oh, you know, Yvonne doesn't seem to be doing as well as she should, because on my care records, it said from the age of 7 that I was above average intelligence. So she said, oh, you know, it doesn't seem quite right. And the teacher said, I can actually remember this. The teacher turned around and said, I don't see why I should have to teach children like that.
Oh my God.
I can actually remember her saying that. And I can remember, obviously, my foster mother made a huge fuss. And then I got put into my sister's class with another teacher. And then it went like a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, that's what it was like. And this would have been 69, 70, 71, that sort of time.
Wow. I mean,
so yeah, really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in obviously in London during those years, and it was, you know, very multicultural, and we had other challenges, but not obviously the same as those. Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, it was a struggle. I think it put me off, you know, it just put me off, made me guarded, made me wary of teachers. That it's bound to, isn't it? It's bound to.
Oh gosh, yes, definitely. There's such a significant impact on us anyway at that point in our lives.
Yeah.
Wow. So Yvonne, you grew up in the Midlands. You had some challenges with you know, your early education, but you know, as you move through, because clearly you loved reading, you clearly loved learning, how did you move to sort of embrace that further, do you think? And when did it start happening, do you think? Because I mean, it's important, I guess, for people to understand that, really.
It went up and down. So I think when I was in the second year at senior school, I won all the prizes educationally and sports-wise. I was like it that year. But then my foster parents got divorced, and I just plummeted down because it was a streamed school. So I plummeted from like the A grades right down to the sort of the bottom grades. And I never really picked up from there. I think it was just too difficult
emotionally.
I think there's a big emphasis that's placed on education for children in the care system, and I think that's right. But I was one of those children where it was just another pressure, and the other pressures needed supporting first. So it just became a pressure. I had the motivation from my foster parents. You know, they were aspirational, but I couldn't cope emotionally. I couldn't self-regulate by that point at all. You know, I just could not self-regulate. So then I went into residential care when I was 14. So the rest of my schooling was spent in residential care. It just got worse and worse, you know. Nobody was sort of looking at me and saying, what do you need? You're obviously very angry. You're obviously very upset about something. What do you need? It was just like, oh, you're not getting on with your schoolwork. So, you know.
Everything you're not doing,
we'll punish you and suspend you. And I think I did get expelled from one school, suspended from quite a few. But no one ever sat me down and said, what do you need?
Okay.
And, you know, so I was kind of like, I think it's difficult then because you're like carrying the aspirations in your head. You know, it would be better if you buckled down and did it, but you're acting out at the same time. Now you're confusing yourself because you're like, I know I should be doing it. I know I can do it. There's this other part of me that just wants to muck about, act out. And I think also I think the other thing is that if you're so different and visible, which I was, I would say I was floating around in a white sea. There's a terrible chance you will become the class clown. To compensate for that. So you're funny, you'll take it further. So I would always take it the furthest. So I would walk through the whole school with a lit cigarette. I would walk through the entire school with a lit cigarette and stand outside the headmaster's door and smoke it, because
Windows default lock screen window, lock screen pane.
Sorry about that. I was getting a weird message.
I don't. I could hear it too. But let's carry on because you know technology. let's just push on. I'm not stopping now. Come on. Sorry about that.
So if I said something about a lock screen, if my computer locks its screen, I will just unlock it. It's a new laptop and it does its own thing sometimes.
Oh, so it may be, okay, so it may be from your end, because I was thinking, but mine's
if it
not.
does lock,
Yeah.
all I've got to do is unlock it.
Okay.
I won't leave the meeting or anything.
All right.
So I think it's so difficult to know that you can do it. You're clever enough to do it, but the rest of your life is so chaotic. It's not going to happen.
You see, you put that so well, and it already gives such a lot of understanding about what at times is happening for young people in their heads, particularly when they're going through a distressful time. And I think that really does explain or gives us a sense of something of your experience, that kind of inner conflict and turmoil. Yeah, I really understand that. Sorry to interrupt, Carol.
No, it's fine. I think if someone had sat me down and said, you know, a lot of your problems are because you're mixed race in a very white environment, and you have no idea how to construct your identity, because if you grow up without the Black parent around you, there's no context for the way you look. There was just no context for me looking different, because it wasn't my Black father was nowhere around. So there you are, bouncing around looking very, very different, but you can't put it into context, and nobody else can put it into context for you.
Yep.
So that's very, very difficult. And so there's the racism, and then there's the fact that you're in the care system. If somebody had sat me down and said, do you know what, that must be really difficult for you, being mixed race, being in a white environment, and also being in the care system, you know, perhaps a penny would have dropped, and I would have had more compassion for myself, because you start to beat yourself up.
Yes.
A lot of your anger is towards yourself, because you keep fucking it up. I know you're probably going to bleep that out, but you just keep fucking it up.
Yeah.
And you get fed up with yourself. You get fed up with yourself, but you can't stop yourself either.
Wow.
So you can understand how difficult it is. You know you're making a mess of everything, but you can't stop yourself because you don't know why you're doing it. So it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, I absolutely recognize some of that, particularly with some of the young people I've worked with, because I recall many times making that same kind of speech. I mean, you know what to do, you know this, that, and the other, you know, as an adult would say to a young person. But I mean, in a sense, is that what we should be doing? Or do you think that we should be sort of preaching, or I mean, how do you think that conversation can be entered into?
Preaching doesn't help at all. It doesn't help at all. I think now I understand it as agency. And so, you know, a lot of people think that agency is something conscious, you know what you're doing, even if you're doing the wrong thing. That's not actually true. A tremendous amount of agency is unconscious. That's the agency that sabotages everything and destroys everything.
Yes.
So you really need to be able to work creatively with young people, I think, and so that they can understand that. I mean, it's something I do with clients who are grown-ups who don't understand that agency is both conscious and unconscious, and that we literally don't know why we're doing things. We know we're doing them, but we still don't know why, and we don't know how to stop it. So I think maybe more creative ways rather than the preaching.
Sure.
You know, like art therapy and drama and music. You know, music's wonderful. Music's absolutely wonderful, because I think a lot of young people can tell you from the words in the songs what's going on for them, you know. Yes. So I just think more creative ways, kind of lecturing and preaching never did anything for me.
So so I mean, what did work for you? How were you?
Really random things worked for me. So when I was in a children's home in Solihull in the West Midlands, it's near Birmingham, Solihull.
Yeah, I know that bit, Yvonne. Come on, give me a bit of credit. I know that bit. Come on.
I lived in a Barnardo's home. I think it only had 6 beds, or maybe 8. It was two council houses knocked together, and we had a dog, and we had this really young staff team. They were so young, and it was quite anarchic in some ways, but there were rules, like if we didn't do the curfew properly, if we came back late, we couldn't go to football. We were all like Villa fans or Birmingham fans. If we really messed it up, we got football taken away. But we had quite, this was the 70s, so it was quite enlightened. It was a bit like, what's that really, is it Summerhill, that school where there's no rules? It was a bit like that, but it was in the care system. So that worked for me, but then we got this matron came. I think there wasn't a matron. I think that's why it was so anarchic.
Oh, wow.
This matron came and started putting down all these rules, and we just all freaked out, But I liked a bit of anarchy with some boundaries, boundaries.
Yeah.
So they'd like take us to all the things they'd lose their jobs for now. They'd take us to the pub. If it was their day off. If it was their day off, or there was only me, they'd say, oh, look, I've got to pop home. Do you want to come with me? We'll go and have a drink and a sandwich in the pub. I was probably 15, 16. We're going to have a drink and a sandwich in the pub. Or I'm going to meet my boyfriend. Come with us. But nothing horrible. No. There was no child abuse or anything like that. It was just like, well, there's the two of us rattling around in this place. Let's go and do something, That worked really well with me. And my headmistress could see that I was very bright, but very troubled. And she, when I'd really annoyed the teachers to the point where I'd been kicked out of the classroom again, she'd sort of sit me down and go, oh, okay, all right, sit down. And then she'd look around her room and she'd go, oh, I'll show you this book. She'll go, this is a book. And it was like, I don't know, Belsen concentration camp. And she'd go, do you know, my mother dressed up as a man and drove to Belsen in the Second World War because she wanted to do something. And she'd tell me all these stories. And actually, she did encourage me to do a little bit of caring as well, because I think she thought I might, might be good at that. I mean, she really pushed me academically, and it took me a long, long time. I didn't go to do my first degree till I was 25, and I was already a parent. But she did. She just gave me that aspiration. So that worked. Kind of coming at me from a random angle. That always worked,
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it would, Yvonne. But I'm also thinking, it's so important that somebody sees something in you. When you said that, I thought, that is so important. You want to say a bit more about that?
I think yes, but there still wasn't a psychological support that I needed.
Sure.
So it was like, education is the key to social mobility, and but still there wasn't enough psychological support to go with it. But I think the way I see it is, when I did my PhD on resilience, which we'll probably come on to.
Oh, absolutely.
What I realized was that all the things you do, or you've done, or people did for me, it's like a little bank account, and it goes into the bank account, and you can draw on it. Maybe not then, but later. Absolutely. So all the things that were done for me that were positive, like going to the pub, all the random conversations, believing in me, I couldn't access them at the time because you can't, because your own self-image is so destroyed. You can't make use of it necessarily at the time. But later on, when you feel better about yourself or things are more stable, that's in the bank account, and you can use that when you want to. So I would say do all those things, but you won't see the results. And this is a problem for social workers.
Yes.
You won't see the results with that child, but if you could catch that child at 25, me going off to poly, or me starting my PhD in my 40s, you'd be, oh, great.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see it when you're working with a child for a couple of years. You're not going to see it.
Yeah, I mean, that is so important to
you're not going to see it,
because certainly in social work, it quite often we're expecting or we're being led to expect immediate results. But I think of the wisdom of the past, where people would often say, look, the very same thing you're saying, it may not necessarily happen right now, but trust me, they will remember it later on. So yeah, there is absolute wisdom in that, and I'm not entirely sure why we don't hold on to that, but I mean, I can come to all kinds of other conclusions. But what would be your comment on why we are not continuing to embrace that idea that it's not immediate change that occurs?
Because I think we've become very target driven, and so even in social care, it's become very target driven. So like, I remember when I was running an advocacy project, and there were like all these targets for looked after children. Like a lot of them were around education, and I was like, but they're not ready, you know, they're not actually ready. And it's like, so, you know, the amount of help you get when you're a care leaver, there's a cutoff point. So, you know, they might want to go to university when they're 35. Why can't they have the money then? Or they might want to do a PhD when they're in their 40s, like me. Why can't they have the money then? You know, so we're trying to cram everything in before they're 16, really, and then cram the rest in between 16 and I don't know what it is now, 21 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's up to 25, but yeah.
They're not, those targets don't suit that client group at all, because they've got a head that's full of chaos that needs sorting out first, and that's going to take a long time. I think that's it puts terrible pressure on not just the young people, but the professionals as well.
Thank you so much for saying that, Yvonne, because you know, obviously,
it does.
You know, spoken from experience, but also from a place of great wisdom, because and I hope that our listeners who are perhaps just embarking on the profession can also hear that and make sense of it, as well as other people. But no, thanks for saying that. Really helpful. I know there's still loads more we can talk about, but let's move a little bit further ahead. And of course, you can go back and forth. I don't mind. You became a lecturer. Was that before you did your PhD? Before you developed your own private practice?
No, I'd been working in the voluntary sector in London, and we moved to Bristol in 95.
Okay.
And then I did my counsellor training.
Okay.
And then I went back to the voluntary sector. And then I started my PhD because from my own experiences, my friends living in the inner city all my adult life, I sort of had my sociology degree, so I understood structural oppression, right? And I'd done my counselling, so I understood, you know, what goes on internally, what goes on psychologically, object relations, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to... But when I started thinking about, it wasn't called resilience then, it was called probably emotional intelligence. When I started thinking about emotional intelligence, I was thinking, I don't understand how all these people who've had these really, really traumatic, difficult lives, why are they still here? Why are they still alive? And, you know, how have they survived? And is there something to look at there? You know, how do you get through a very traumatic childhood? So I wanted to look at adults who've been in the care system as children.
Right.
And I found that the professionals around children in care and looked after children quite often either saw them as victims or they saw them as kind of like almost like superheroes. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Victims, super survivors, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
But not just survivors. Some saw them as like super survivors. And I was like, okay. So I then realized it was the resilience that I was talking about. So I wanted to understand what happens to trauma over a lifetime and what happens to resilience over a lifetime. And I thought they were two completely different things for years. And then I realized it was the same thing. They go together.
Yeah.
They go together. So that was really important to me, and to sort of just see what I wanted to know was, what had they done by themselves without the professionals? You know,
okay.
how much of it was them? So like nature nurture, how much of it had they done, like myself? How much of it had I done? And how much of it had been help from somebody else or something else? And I realized you couldn't separate the two. So when I was interviewing my participants, so they'd been in like foster care, adoption, or kinship care. I realized that you couldn't separate the two. So I did a life story interview, and they'd say, I've done it all by myself. I've always been on my own. I've had to do everything. It's me. I've done it all. Yeah, it's just me, me, and me. And then in the resilience interview, I would say, okay, so what do you think your resilience has been? And they couldn't say. So then we'd unpick it together because it was co-created.
Right.
So we'd start unpicking it, and they'd say, actually, my best friend's mum was really nice to me, or the neighbours on that street didn't care that there was a children's home on the street, or this one teacher really believed in me. And you'd realise, no, they hadn't done it by themselves. There'd always been other people having a kind of input that we were talking about a minute ago.
Yes.
That the little deposits in the bank account. And so I realised that resilience was this completely dynamic interaction between an individual and their environment. And the other thing I realised was that people were looking at resilience the wrong way. So people were saying that resilience was about having gone through trauma, and then you make this kind of positive adaptation. So if you look at me now, I've actually had people at conferences when I've spoken about being in care and my research come up to me and said, it can't have been that bad because look at you now, you're Dr. Yvon Guest. Now I'm like, shut the fuck up. Do you know what I mean? Get out of the face.
For sake.
But that's very telling. So they would look at me and go, oh, look at her with her positive adaptation. She's grown up through the care system. She's mixed race. She was a single parent in the 80s. And she's got PhD. She's the best example of resilience. That's not looking at the times when I was sitting in the police station or taking drugs or, messing everything up. And so that's not the case. So what I realized, where I could see clearly that had gone wrong, was that there's two types of resilience.
Okay.
So the first type is to survive, and we can all do that as long as we've got the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy. Yes. We can all do that. We've got just about enough to eat, just about enough clean water, and just enough fresh air. We can all survive. In fact, if you think about it, as a species, we're predetermined to survive. But a lot of really traumatized people are great survivors. You'll have come across them as clients, service users. Look at them surviving, fiddling the benefit system, hustling their way through life. And, there's a sort of service user, you'll go, if there was a nuclear war, two things would survive: cockroaches and that service user. They would survive, But I realized that can become problematic if you want something else.
Yeah.
So if you're a care leaver like myself and you're 30, you're thinking, I want to go a bit further with my life now and get a bit further, but I don't seem to be able to. And what seems to be holding us back is some of our coping mechanisms, basically. Things like that, like acting out, taking drugs, any kind of substance
Locking
issue.
window. Pain.
No, that's my computer talking. Not being able to form healthy relationships with ourselves, or with
Yep.
other people.
Yeah.
So so if you've gone through the care system as a Black social worker who wrote an amazing dissertation, I think, called Making It Alone, about Black children in the care system. And she said they had this philosophy, this internal philosophy called Making It Alone. They had to do it by themselves. Nobody's going to do it for them. They had to find a way through it. And that's great
can you
for
recall
survival.
Can you recall the person who wrote it? Or I should be able to find it on.
INCE, INCE.
Okay.
INCE. If you can't find it, email me because it's on my bibliography. But those kinds of survival techniques are going to probably get in the way of you moving to beyond survival, because beyond survival, you want to be having good relationships with yourself, good relationships with other people, and fulfilling what I see as your inherent potential. So if you are intelligent enough to study, you should. If you're not, you should be able to find out what your thing is, music or whatever your thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your unique potential, your unique potential. That's when you bump off the survival level to the beyond survival level. But what makes a difference between the two and moving from one to the other is your internal resources and the external resources around you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you're a single mom now with food banks and universal credit nightmares and all that going on, it's going to be really hard for you, however hard you want to do it, because the external resources. You have to remember that when I was in my 20s and I went back to uni and I was a single parent, we had enough social housing. We had enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a beautiful flat in London. I had a GLC flat, flipping gorgeous.
Wow. GLC.
Beautiful flat in London.
Yeah.
Free education.
Yes.
Some of the people in my research and a lot of care leavers that I've met did really well out of universal free education and going to university when they were ready. So when I went, I was in my 20s and a lot of my friends were older, mature students. They'd done access courses, but they were able to go to university. It was free. Yeah. And they got a grant. Yeah. So a lot of these external resources that I had that really massively helped me to move from survival to beyond survival, they're not there now. So that's going to make it so much harder, because I don't think I would have taken on a student loan of thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. I know I wouldn't. I would have been absolutely terrified to do that. So I think, the external resources and the internal resources, that's what moves us between survival and beyond survival.
Absolutely. And I mean, I hope that, what you've just shared really hits home, because when I think about my son, and he is a product of student loan, and I think back to when I sort of did my studies and so on, I was thinking, boy, like you, I don't know if I would have gone there.
I wouldn't have gone.
The prospect of, well, I know I wouldn't have, because no doubt it would have been means tested or whatever. But this is, I guess, something about a society, a caring society, that really should be about ensuring that everyone has some equality of opportunity. And I think in the 80s, that was very, very present, very, very present. We were very woke to that whole prospect. Subsequently, and no doubt due to sort of conservative governments and then New Labour and all the rest of them, what would be your kind of observation and comment about that trajectory in terms of where we are as a society? I mean, I know I'm going off point, but I mean, you might have a view about it.
I just can't imagine trying to navigate all the things I had to navigate then. I think I'd be in an institution.
Yeah.
I'd be sectioned. Those kind of pressures, because although it was Thatcherism in the 80s, and although they were anti-single parents, it didn't mean that you didn't have enough money, that you needed a food bank. It was nothing like universal credit.
And you know, equally, there was also a very strong lobby. I mean, people,
huge.
Yeah, people felt to some degree empowered to hit back.
And I remember something called the Fair Rent Tribunals. I had a boyfriend whose parents were very posh, and his mother was on a fair rent tribunal. So she would go around London and go, that rent's too high, and get it put down.
Wow.
Where's that gone? Can you even imagine that now? Fair Rent Tribunal.
Well, certainly not in London, mate. I tell you, it's
not anywhere.
Anyway,
not anywhere in this country. So I think even on it's a really strange thing to say, but my partner and I talk about this all the time, that, you know, you start looking back on Thatcherism as a bit of a golden age compared to what's going on.
Oh God, yeah. Oh Lord.
Never thought I'd hear myself say that.
I'm not going to bleep that one out.
But you look back, what they've done around universal credit, what you know, what people are facing now with these fuel bills, and there's no social housing.
No,
they haven't built any social housing for decades.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just seems crueler. But I didn't see anything any better under New Labour.
No,
I didn't see any massive improvements under New Labour.
No.
Education. Yeah, if you paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Paid for it.
Ain't that the truth? Definitely.
So, yeah, cruel.
Okay.
We're in a very cruel world. It's cruel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's an understatement. So, you know, definitely that message needs to be got home. So you let's move now towards your private practice, Yvonne, and how your research and so on has impacted, you know, your current work. And you know, I guess, where do you see it going, if that's an appropriate question to ask?
Oh yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because I trained in Bristol in 1995. I was the first. There was me and a South Asian guy. We were the first two people of colour to train with Bristol Relate, 95.
Okay.
So I trained with Relate, and I think I saw and then I did a bit of private practice. I think in a 7-year period, I saw 2 Black clients, and one had been transracially adopted, and one was in a same-sex relationship with a middle-class white woman.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only Black clients I saw in 7 years. So when I did my PhD, I thought it was still like that, you know.
Yeah.
Black people don't want to go to therapy. Fine. So I thought, coming out of my PhD, I would get, you know, care leavers, people who've been fostered, people who've been adopted, people who were adoptive parents, people who were foster parents, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Couples, because I'd been trained to work with couples. So, you know, but when I think the first client I got was a young mixed race person living in an isolated rural area with no context for their Blackness, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it just snowballed, and I just kept getting more and more Black and mixed race clients. And I was like, okay, they do want counselling and therapy. They do. Okay, right, okay. But the problem for me with all the mixed race clients was I was sitting there thinking, yeah, I understand. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I get that. But with my other clients, I had theory to fall back on.
Yeah.
Like for couples, I've got all my couples theory. For everybody else, I've got all my object relations and my attachment and my behavioural and my family systems. But for my mixed race class, I had nothing theoretical or even training.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing. Black therapists don't write about the mixed race experience. Mm-hmm. White therapists don't write about the mixed race experience. So more of us are doing that now. More of us are doing that now. So I was processing by writing, I think, by writing. So I wasn't expecting that. I kind of, you know, you go with it, don't you? And I think now, so that's 5 years later. So now I feel more steps ahead of my mixed race clients than I did.
Okay.
Before I was like, the only difference between me and you is I'm sitting here. That's the only difference. And the little bit I went into in my research, right? That was the only difference. Now it's like, no, there's a lot I've processed and there's a lot I've written about and there's a lot of conversations I've had with other therapists of colour and Black therapists and white therapists. So I feel I'm quite a few places ahead of my clients now. So that's really good.
It is really good. And I'm sure extremely helpful for others. What do you do with all that thinking? I mean, I know that you obviously did a lot of research. Are you really involved now in sort of publishing more of your
well,
thinking?
I like writing, but I find it absolute torture. I'll be honest with you. I'd rather have
Tell me about it.
10 more childbirths than write anything.
No, Yvonne, don't go there. Don't go there. That's not true. Come on. That cannot be true.
It's torture. It's torture because I think it's torture because you're out there ahead of the field. You're not with the field. It was the same with my PhD. I was kind of ahead of the field in the way I was looking at resilience. I was kind of ahead in the way I was looking at care leavers as adults. So there's that thing about being in front of the field is always uncomfortable. It's also very exciting, and I am an Aries. I'm massively into astrology. As an Aries, I'm supposed to be leading the charge, and I'm fine with that, you know. But at the same time, that's quite difficult. And I think I'm very careful now not to overdo things, because a colleague last year asked me to help them out. They'd done the rapid eye movement training. Okay. But they'd started it face to face, and then they'd had to finish it online. Yeah. They didn't feel comfortable about letting themselves loose on clients. So they asked other therapists like myself if they would be like guinea pigs. So I said, oh yeah, I'd love to know more about EMDR. I didn't know really anything about it. So we did a lot of EMDR, and so we kind of did it kind of like colleagues, like, oh, that's different from talking therapy, isn't it? Oh, okay, go on, say that again. Okay, oh, you know. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I found it very, very helpful. But the most helpful thing she said to me was, Yvonne, you're very immersed in race. You live it, you work with it, you write about it, you research it. You just very, very immersed. And we talked about it, and I realized it was becoming traumatizing. Oh, wow. Re-traumatizing. Yeah, and I think we have to be very careful. Wow. I'm very, very careful now. So when you contacted me, you'll see that I gave you a date way in the future. Yes. Remember? Yes. That's how I operate now. I'm like, no, I don't have to do that tomorrow. I can do that. So like a podcast like this, I wouldn't do more than one a month now. I would, because you drawing on yourself, you're making yourself vulnerable, you're talking about stuff that's been difficult, you know, and you can't keep doing that. So and I say that to colleagues, clients, friends, family, be careful. Be careful. You know, I so value you sharing that, because colleagues and I, other Black colleagues and I have talked about that that sort of emotional drain, and the whole kind of, because sometimes I do some teaching on sort of race issues or equality and diversity and so on, and the material is difficult because you have lived through it. And I can absolutely understand you saying that, you know, to keep on reliving it does take from you. And I hope that people can really hear that and understand that. You're not a robot, you're a human being. You've had these experiences. You continue to live through and process what you've been through and so on. So it
I mean, I don't know if you want to say more about that, because I
realized something very, very interesting is that somebody said to me that a lot of us, it's a bit like the survival to beyond survival thing. So a lot of us move from survival to beyond survival using our trauma as a passport. We go into social work, we're going to healthcare. We, I've used my trauma as a means of social mobility, a lot in my adult life.
Wow.
And so if somebody asks you to do something and draw on your blackness or your mixed race identity or your care leaver experience, they're asking you to draw on your trauma. And that then has currency in the professional world.
Wow. True.
And you've got to stop and think about that, because actually that's very exploitative. If you're not managing it like I do now, I go, you can have that part of me, but you can't have it till then. And then no one else can draw on that well until a month after that, because what they're actually asking you is to dig deep into your trauma. If you're teaching race, you where are you coming from if not from your own trauma? You may be being traumatized while you're teaching it.
Absolutely.
By the students.
Yeah, and then we have a tendency to over intellectualize, and then of course when you lay in bed at night thinking about your day, it all comes leaping back. So yeah, very, very important point there.
So I do say to people now, I was with a group of mixed race therapists at the weekend, and I said, look, be careful, be really careful, be really careful. Because, since Black Lives Matters, which has been an amazing thing, it's also, I think it's been a very challenging thing to pace ourselves and remember that this is about trauma. We're all like, this is about, fighting and fighting injustice and righting wrongs. I'll give an example of what I can't watch the newsreels from the 60s anymore. I can't watch them. I can't watch the dogs and the water hoses. I find it deeply traumatizing. But also what I find also really difficult is nobody ever says how difficult it was. You're beginning to hear now things like Martin MLK and saying he was frightened and things like that. We don't hear that enough, because I can't imagine what it was like to have dogs let loose on you and water hoses. I can't imagine what that was like.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of the nature of the work that you're involved in, and obviously your own lived experiences, you begin to think about things on another level, because it's not just about the I have a dream speech. It's about what people had to daily live with, the fear, the horror, and all the rest of it. And like you, I very much try to manage what I take in, because I find the older I get, the more sensitive I am to some of those horrors. You just have a deeper understanding of what people's lives must have been like. Wow. Okay, let me just ask, I just wanted you to really Yvonne, to say something a bit more about this beyond survival kind of concept that you've been sharing.
Okay,
it's quite important.
So I'll give you an example. So if you look back to we've been in austerity now for 14 years, haven't we?
Yeah.
If you think back to before the financial crash, there would have been a lot of people, let's take care, there would have been a lot of care leavers that were doing okay. Like myself, they'd gone to university, got a bit of social mobility, were still living in their social housing, or they'd bought it, or they'd sold it, or bought their own properties. They were doing all right. But I think austerity and the lockdown, I noticed during the lockdown, people were suddenly not doing all right, really not doing all right. And what I did when I went into my PhD, you think you've reflected deeply, but you can't. Yeah, that's like an ongoing process. So I thought I wanted to show that care leavers were resilient. They were resilient. And I realized that through them, that yes, they were, but resilience isn't like climbing a mountain. You don't get to a plateau and stay there, or you don't get to the top and stay there.
No.
If what I realized was that if you've been traumatized numerous times as a child, it sets this vulnerability that if you get traumatized numerous times as an adult, it can start to unravel.
Okay.
So there you are at the summit of your resilience. Along comes austerity or COVID, lockdown, or some 2 or 3 really traumatic experiences in your life. You could start to slide back down the resilience mountain towards the survival level. You may never go back to base camp, but you can't stay necessarily on the summit or the top, the plateau or the top. There's a vulnerability that's built in that means it can come undone.
Yeah, and as you're speaking there, I guess I can attribute that sort of explanation to lots of experiences in life, because that old adage about nothing ever stays the same. But I think sometimes we're led to believe we arrive and the journey's over, kind of thing. But that's definitely not the case in so many other ways. So I mean, in terms of how you're sort of helping your clients with these challenges, I mean, are you seeing lots of people with those kinds of challenges where they are finding themselves slipping back to, not quite to base camp, I would imagine, but
well, during the lockdown, I mean, any therapist would tell you what it was like during the lockdown, because with the exception of when I first started seeing mixed race clients, you're not usually having the same experience, but with the lockdown, we were all having the same experience as our clients. We were just as frightened.
Yes.
We were terrified.
Yep.
We were absolutely terrified.
Yep.
And what I have found coming back to practicing is that more and more often there are things showing up in the counselling room that have no resolution.
Okay.
So there was no resolution to lockdown except them not locking us down, except the vaccine.
Well,
that was, that was it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they contained it, and then they brought, they locked us all up to contain it, and then there was a vaccine. But for my clients, there was no resolution, there was no therapeutic resolution to lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I found more and more instances like that. So there's no therapeutic resolution to social inequality. I can't change social inequality for my clients. There's no clinical resolution to racism. So all we can work on is how they manage within those confines. That there's no resolution. It's what you feel you can manage within those difficulties. But that's happening more and more and more for therapists. They'll all tell you this. There's a whole list of things now that have no resolution. Climate change is a massive one. You can't find a clinical resolution to climate change anxiety. At the end of the day, I think with a lot of these things, what I realized, and I got this from climate change therapists, is this, that what the best thing I can sometimes say to people is, with things like climate change and racism and social inequality, we seem to go from hope to despair, like almost within a day.
Oscillate,
as a social worker, you'll know that one.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm despairing, and then the next day, I've got a bit of hope. And I think it's more like that, looking at your responses and being honest and saying, I honestly think that the last couple of days I fell into a bit of despair.
Okay.
But I was like, okay, despair, you haven't got any clients, okay, for a few days. So be in this place of despair. See what it's like, see what's going on. because you know that at some point something will come along that you don't expect, and you'll have that bit of hope again. So I think a lot of it is sometimes all we can do is it starts getting a bit existential. You know, look at our reactions and look at how we can live with our minds in these difficult times. It starts to get very, very existential. A lot of the conversations I have with clients are incredibly existential. They're incredibly about, how do I make meaning out of this? But also, some things just don't make sense. And I will say this time and time again, racism does not make sense. You can describe it as whatever you like theoretically, as a byproduct of capitalism, as anything you like. I've written a chapter where I gave a psychosocial explanation of racism, but I also know that in that moment when it's happening to you, it doesn't make sense. Or if your child comes home from school, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. Why would somebody treat somebody else like that based on the fact that they're a different skin color? It actually defies sense. And I think there's a lot of things in the world that we're having to live with now that do not make sense. And that's very difficult.
My gosh,
we do want to make sense of things.
Yeah.
We do. It's how we sleep better at night. Because we go, oh, that makes sense. Now I go to sleep. You know, so.
Oh my gosh. So in a sense, Yvonne, this whole kind of piece around uncertainty, what more can you say about that? How do we live with all the uncertainty that's present in our lives? That's very existential.
It is existential. I'll give you an example. My dear nephew, we have a big German family we're connected to. My son's half German, so our German family are very, very dear to us. And my eldest nephew was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor last autumn, out of the blue. Okay. Out of the blue. And I just noticed the whole family, especially his family that are very, very close to him, his mother and father and brothers and sisters, were all in different places in their grief cycle, anger, denial, acceptance, despair, you know, bargaining. And we all were. But the only way that we've been able to kind of do it is we have to take every day as it comes. We can't think ahead. Right. There's too many uncertain things. So it's kind of a reminder of that actually that goes for our lives, you know, there's today. And be in the present, because if you're not in the present, you're worrying about the future, or you're holding on to something troubling about the past. So it does become quite existential, I think. And I think you have to find your own kind of practice, not if it's prayers, it's prayers, if it's chanting, it's chanting, but something that supports you in this world, in this life, that you can draw from. And I think, you know, sometimes I think one of the most difficult things for people of I'm 60, so I was born in 1962. So if you think about the end of the Second World War in 1945, we had a huge long period in the West, in Europe, of stability and prosperity. And we thought that was it. This is about the resilience. It's going to last forever. We were all, you know, a lot of us were well beyond survival, and we thought we'd reached the top of the mountain. But look at how it's unraveled, how quickly did that unravel? With the financial crisis, Brexit, austerity, you know, COVID. That's what I was saying about my individual clients and people that I know. That can unravel so fast.
Yeah, very fragile. you know, when you feel big and bad and strong, that is the last thing on your mind. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and frightening, and it's frightening. I think it's been very frightening the last 14 years since the financial crash. We seem to have just lurched from one, you know, kind of global disaster to another, and that's very unsettling. It is very deeply unsettling at a very deep level when we've had really such a long period of peace, prosperity, and stability. Not that the rest of the world had that, because we know they didn't, and we had it at their expense. I know that.
Yes, yeah.
But you know, these are very unsettling and very troublesome times, and takes a lot of navigating.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Yvonne, for your take on so many things. I think our listeners will get a lot of value from what you've shared with us today. Thank you so much for your wisdom in so many ways. But now, what are you doing currently where listeners can perhaps follow your work? Are you doing anything or have you got any kinds of events or anything coming up soon? Or I mean,
if I'm doing anything, I put it on LinkedIn, which is where you found me.
Yes.
I don't do Twitter. I put it on LinkedIn. I might put a little bit on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm not doing a huge amount at the moment. I was talking to my partner this morning saying, you know, it feels like COVID's gone quite quiet. You know, can we start to think about going back to how we were, you know? I haven't got anything in the pipeline at the moment. Maybe just like enjoy this year.
Just
have a year
to calm ourselves down.
I'm sure I'll probably get asked to do some more podcasts. There is something I want to write about. I do want to write some more on mixed race identity.
Okay.
And I'm sure I will. You know, I think there's something very interesting about identity, race, and class. That I think it really needs looking at with all the current conversations. There's some very powerful things that we're not really paying attention to about race and class, I think are causing a lot of problems in the world.
Okay.
So I think, I'll probably churn something out.
Well,
I think this year probably.
Yeah, I mean,
I say that.
That's fine. But what I'd like though, Yvonne, is in terms you have already written pieces and so on. So perhaps I can ask you to send me a couple of references.
Oh God, yeah.
Because I know your PhD was quite easy to find.
Yeah, because they're all online. Well, a lot of them are online now, so people can. I'll send you some. I'll send you the link to. So there's the PhD. There's an article I wrote for Therapy Today on mixed race identities, and there's a chapter in a book. It's a therapy book by therapists of color. It's called Black Identities, White Therapies, and
I've got that.
Year. So there's that one as well. There's that one as well.
Yeah, I think.
So I've got a chapter in there.
Yeah, that's probably what I was doing when I was supposed to be doing something else. Okay, well, what was I going to say? So that's fine. In a way, if people just put your name into the search engine, a lot of
everything comes up.
Yeah, everything comes up.
Loads that comes up.
Yeah. So I will definitely reference those things. Yeah, I think any final words from you, because I mean even your work with the mixed race population and so on, that is a whole other podcast. So I hope you will come back at some point in the future.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to, because that's a really important area, because I think, even if you're a Black person, you've got nieces, nephews, children. Mixed race now.
Yeah.
There isn't a Black family really now that hasn't got mixed race relatives. It would be impossible now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what's also important is what you're saying about Black people are not writing about it, and white people are not writing about it. So there's a void, And I guess you're feeling it.
I think it's an experience that's so difficult to understand.
Yeah.
If you're black or white, I think to be.
And the temptation is to overly simplify. That's my worry. The temptation is to overly simplify the situation. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I think it's such a unique position to hold in society, and I feel like I am in a much stronger position because I think I spent so much of my life feeling torn apart.
Yeah.
I felt like I was literally being torn apart and being made to choose either way. And I think I'm very firmly in my being now that I refuse to be asked to choose. I will not choose. I will not sacrifice one half of my identity for the other. And people find that really hard because one half of my identity is white. So I think a lot of black people are like, well, just give it up. It's rubbish anyway. And I'm like, no, because it's mine. It's mine.
You got to own it, Bill. You got to own it.
Sorry if that's a problem for you, but it's half of who I am. So I don't want to, because the pain of suppressing that physically and psychologically, it does us so much harm, mixed race people, if we try to do that.
Yeah.
So I think I think it takes I think I'm in a much better place with it, you know, myself, that I feel I can offer something not just to other mixed race. A lot of my clients are black, and that blows me away. I've got a lot of black clients, and I've got a lot of South Asian clients. I've got Korean clients, and it blows me away. And because what I also know is that as the majority of my black clients have problems with their identity, with their racial identity, because they've got one foot in the UK and another one in Nigeria or Ghana or the Caribbean. They're between cultures. There's generational problems. They're not living the same life as mum and dad. Mum and dad are trying to hold on to that culture as hard as they can, bless them. Children want to throw it away. You know, that it doesn't mean anything until you haven't got it. Yeah. So I was really surprised at how many clients I get who are black or from other ethnic groups that come to me. But as I said, I think it's because if you Google, which I'm sure clients must do, we're not allowed to as therapists, tempting though it is, we're not allowed to Google clients. But clients can Google me, they can see what I've written and what I've done. And but I'm quite amazed that it's not just mixed race clients. I see white people as well, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so that's a whole conversation.
Yeah, man. Oh, wow. Well, we're definitely going to reconnect, Yvonne, because
I'd love to. It's lovely chatting to you. I know you didn't think you had a Midlands accent, but I can something. I'm connected.
Listen, lady. Listen. Behave. But no, it was really lovely speaking to you and hearing you and listening to you. And I'm going to enjoy going back and replaying this and listening to it again, because I think there are so many nuggets. Let me also add that I've also asked some of my students to check you out, because some of your material is absolutely up their street in terms of what they're trying to research. So you are being referenced, darling. Don't you worry about that. In
the mixed race stuff or the resilient stuff?
Well, the mixed race and the resilient stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because we've got people who are kind of trying to make sense of their lives as well.